I'll call to order the virtual meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee. I will begin by reading a land acknowledgement statement. On December 15th, 2022, we acknowledge that the sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been the site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. The land is the ancestral unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for the land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. All participants are asked to keep their microphones on mute and cameras off during staff and consultant presentations. There will be an opportunity for the public and committee members to ask questions following the presentation this evening. If you have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. I am John Warnless, Chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. I will now take attendance of our committee members and staff. Please raise your hand or declare your presence when I call your name. Jacqueline Grimes.
Present.
Bill Widdenmeyer.
Present.
Councillor Jay Brennan.
Present.
Stephen McGuire.
Present.
Senior Planner Carl Grenke.
Present.
Planner 1 Richard Grant.
Present.
Planning Clerk Mary Remig.
Present.
Jack Anderson sends his regrets. Committee members are asked to raise their hand when they wish to speak. Alternatively, please find an appropriate opportunity at any available time to notify the chair verbally if you wish to speak. We'll now continue with the agenda. Item number 2, approval of agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
By Bill, seconded by Jay. All in favor? Carried. Item 3, adoption of minutes. Planning Advisory Committee meeting, November the 3rd, 2022. Can I have a motion? Moved by Jacqueline. Seconded by Stephen. All in favor? Carried. We'll now enter into the public meeting. Public meeting process portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. Please be advised that you may have this virtual meeting or leave this virtual meeting at any time. Applicants, agents, and members of the public logged in to participate in the public meeting are asked to please keep their microphones on mute and cameras off until called upon by the chair. If you wish to speak to the application and have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. The purpose of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting is to consider 4 applications that are before us. Minor variance application MV 22-04, which seeks relief for the height of an accessory structure within the residential type 2 zone located at 84 Main Street East, and consent applications B22-03, B22-04, and B22-05, which to sever 1723 Beckwith Street North and 7 William Street East, which were recently amalgamated and established a series of right-of-ways for the purpose of the vehicular access and parking. This meeting is the opportunity to provide any feedback on this application. The Planning Advisory Committee welcomes any questions and comments you may have. We encourage you to provide feedback at the public meeting, as the Planning Act rules suggest that the public's ability to voice objections later in the process may be limited if a written or oral comment is not submitted. The committee is in the approval authority of minor variance and consent applications. The committee will review and consider the feedback regarding the proposals to inform their decision on the application. I'll now pass the meeting over to our Planner 1, Richard Grant, to report on the notification and summary of application MV-22-04. Following the questionnaire, I will call on any public participants one at a time to offer feedback, comments, or questions regarding the proposal. The applicant will also be provided an opportunity to address any concerns brought to the committee by the public. Richard?
Hello, everyone. Can you put these? There we go. Sweet. So we have a minor variance application for 84 Main Street East for Matthew Birch and Elizabeth Levier. Next slide, please. The applicant proposes a two-story garage unit as an accessory structure on the subject property. The applicant seeks a relief of 0.8 meters, which is 2.62 feet, to construct a 5.4 tall two-story garage. The zoning bylaw, section 4.1.3, requires a maximum height of 4.5 meters or 14.76 feet for accessory structures in residential zones. Next slide, please. This picture shows the subject property at 84 Main Street East. Next slide, please. And this is the site plan and as well as survey that shows where the proposed shed is going to go, and the blue dotted line there, which is right along the property. Next slide, please. This shows the elevations of the two-story shed. Next slide, please. And this shows the interior shot of the subject property where the proposed shed will be going as it sits along the fence on the farthest corner of the lot. Next slide, please. And this shows where the house is in proximity to the proposed shed that sits on the farthest corner of the lot. Next slide, please. And this slide shows where the driveway is. The driveway acts as the right-of-way that goes all the way to the edge of the property and gives access to the other side for the neighbors on 80 Main Street East. Next slide, please. Now, the purpose of public meetings is to involve the community considering a change in land use rules for a given parcel of land. Next slide, please. The feedback given was from Public Works, which was advising that once the application has been permitted, there will be an inspection from the building department to ensure that any grading issues have been addressed, and ensuring that the eaves troughs are directed and discharging into the interior lot instead of abutting the property line. That was just a bit of note that the Public Works Department had. Next slide, please. Now, these are the four tests from section 45 of the Planning Act that sets out to determine if the minor variance is good or not. Next slide, please. Test 1. The applicant seeks an approval for relief in height of 0.8 meters for a two-story garage that is an accessory to the main building. The applicant does not change the use of the property and allows the residence to be better used by its occupants, with no anticipated impacts on the character of the neighborhood or the functional use of the site. The application is considered to apply as it is largely consistent with policies of residential designation and further enhances the utility of the subject property. Next slide, please. Test 2. The applicant requires a relief from section 4.1.3 of the zoning bylaw, which has a maximum height restriction of 4.5 meters in residential zones. The requested relief of 0.8 meters in height for the accessory structure does not comply with zoning, but it does comply with the general intent of the zoning bylaw because the proposed structure does allow for sufficient access to sunlight, as well as not creating too much shadow while remaining in character of the neighborhood. Though the two-story shed is the first of its kind in the neighborhood, tall sheds are not out of character for residential use. Therefore, staff are of the view that the purpose and rationale of the zoning provision are protected, and therefore the requested relief meets the intent of the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. Task number 3, desirable or appropriate. The proposal represents an individual opportunity to provide improved use of the applicant's amenity space as additional storage. The proposal also supports an existing residential use in the neighborhood by replacing the previous shed as noted. Next slide, please. Task 4, minor in impact and nature. Located in the applicant's backyard in the far corner farthest away from the street will have a minimal visual impact on the neighborhood. Also, being well treated, the concern of creating excessive amount of shadow or loss of sunlight should not be great despite its size and because of its location. Additionally, the trees add extra cover that overcompensates for the location of the two-story garage. Based on its location and intended purpose, the request for relief would permit an accessory structure that would have minimal impact on the neighborhood, while increasing functionality of the residential space. Next slide, please. This is my recommendation to the committee. The decision shall apply to the permit. The decision shall apply to permit the height relief of 0.8 meters of the proposed two-story within the backyard of the property as detailed on the site plan and elevations. Also, I should like to note that the recommendation given by Public Works is not necessarily a condition. It's more just something that should be noted when the permit application has been processed. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. We'll begin by hearing from members of the public. All comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair. If you have signed in with the recording secretary and have requested to speak to the application, I will call on you by name one at a time to offer any feedback. So we have no public in attendance here, so I'll now call on Mr. Birch to speak to his application.
Thanks for having me, everybody. Thank you, Richard, for that. What I'd like to add is upon my permit, I put in for the setbacks. I actually went more than what the desired amount is. I went 5 feet for the setbacks off the property line on each property line. And pertaining to the eaves trough, that wouldn't be a problem. We'd have the water run out into my secondary lot there and away from my neighbor's property. So that wouldn't be an issue at all.
Matt,
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Are you having the setbacks verified?
Yeah. I applied for my permit and the permit was approved and everything was good until it wasn't.
But I mean verified in any way by a building location survey.
Well, not by a survey, but I had David Sutherland. He came out and he's approved my footings, and he verified, I could use him as verification. He verified that it was 5 feet setbacks from my fence line. It might even be more than that. I think my property line could be on the other side of the fence, to be honest.
Any questions from the committee?
No, I don't think so.
Jay?
No, don't really have a question, but a comment. I mean, I support staff's recommendation. This is fulfilled the 4 tests for a minor variance. I visited the property on the street level and saw the footings that are there. And, you know, I have no problem with it. What we're talking about is the 2 feet relief. And that's what we're talking about tonight. So I have no problem with it. And I'd support it.
Bill?
Only that I also visited the property and I agree with what Jay had to say. And I think that this would, as a matter of fact, I have a feeling that it will enhance the property. So there you go. I'm in favor.
Thank you, gentlemen. I agree.
Jacqueline or Stephen?
I guess yeah, just echo the same comments that that Jay had.
Mr. Chair, I feel like it would be also an improvement to the property. Are you, with your comment, Mr. Chair, is there a concern?
Well, it just verifies that he's within what the minimum setbacks are. That's all. We have no proof that it is.
Yeah.
That's all. I'm just covering a point here. Like you're going to okay something, Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can assure that our building inspector is certainly he works very diligently to ensure that that setbacks are followed, and he will actually get a note from Mary that a survey was submitted with the application, and at the final stage as well, he has the right to ask for an as-built to confirm that everything is built as placed. So I'm confident that through the building permit review and through the building permit review process that building department staff will appropriately verify the location of the structure.
Thanks, Carl. Any other questions? Okay, the committee has the task of making a decision here for the minor variance application. For the committee is ready to do so. I will now entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Bill. Seconded by Jay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you for participating in the planning process of application MV-22-04. Any participants that have not signed in and required further notice regarding the application and asked to please reach out to the planning clerk, Mary Remick, by phone at the town hall. Appeal rights presented by the Planning Act will be outlined on the notice of decision. If you have any questions on this application or the process, I invite you to get in touch with the planning staff. We'll now move into applications for B22-03, B22-04, and B22-05. I will now pass the meeting over to Richard to report on the notification and summary of applications B22-03, B22-04, B22-05. Following this presentation, I will call on public participation one at a time to offer feedback, comments, and questions regarding the proposal. The applicant will also have a chance to speak with concerns brought to by the committee by the public. Richard?
Excuse me, Richard, you're on mute.
I was on mute, sorry. Here's the consent application for B 22-03 for 7 William Street East and B 2204 for 17-23 Beckwith Street North and B 2205 for 5 William Street East. For applicants, Mike Tabaja, which is 4012747 Canada Inc. and Hutt and Dobson Insurance Group Insurance. Next slide, please. Now, here's a site map of all of the concurrent applications. In the green square, that would be 7 William Street East. That is the portion of the lots. Now, the color, the blue color dashed line is also part of B 22-03, but this just shows you the first half of the lot as opposed to the second lot all together. Now, 5 William Street East is the gray square that is beside. Can you see my mouse? Oh, I guess, I don't know if that's. So for the proposed severance, for the purposes of an easement 52 meters, that is the long blue square that is beside the green square. And for 17-22 Beckwith Street North, that is the large rectangular square numbered 17. The easement for B 2204 is the orange square. I'll go over these in detail, considering that there are a lot of applications going at the same time. Next slide, please. Application B 22-03 proposes to sever the lands as 7 William Street East from 17-23 Beckwith Street North. Both properties were merged because they're owned by the same person, Mike Tabaja, creating an easement, creating a 339 meter square vacant lot that's going to be accessed from William Street East. The application also proposes to create a 169 meter square easement that's currently consisting of a parking area to benefit 17-23 Beckwith Street North. Next slide, please. So the diagram highlighted here shows you the retained land that are 169 meters squared. If you look further up, the first portion of the lot is 7 William Street East, and that's what's going to be severed. Now, the retained lands are 17-23 Beckwith Street North, and that is the larger rectangle on the right. Now, the easement that's being discussed here is 33 meters squared, and that is the small rectangular square that's being pointed to the right of way, RS 95353. Next slide, please. Application B 2204 proposes to create an easement that is 33 meters long. That is essentially the right of way that's discussed in the previous slide. And this will go behind the existing building at 1723 Beckwith North, and that will provide access to the lot at 7 William Street East. Next slide, please. So the highlighted portion shows you the easement that is being created for application B 22-04. The lot that's adjacent to it on the right is the lot that is being that's going to be benefiting from the easements, and this continues the development envelope as well as the additional parking. The lot on the left is the commercial building that's at 17-23 Beckwith Street North. Next slide, please. Application B 22-04 proposes to create an easement that is 57 meters long from 5 William Street East to provide a permanent legal access to the parking areas that's behind the properties. Next slide, please. And this is highlighted as the blue rectangular dotted line, that is surrounding, that is the easement that will be created because of application B 22-05. Next slide, please. So a bit of background. The applicants are being represented by Tracy Zander of Zander Plan. The site plan approval was given early this year by council for a two-story addition to 17-23 Beckwood Street North to accommodate 6 residential units. Mike Tabaja had bought 7 William Street and demolished the building, and now it is a vacant lot. And the vacant lot is being being described as part of a conceptual development envelope. So we'll get to that in the next minute. The current intent for the lot is to provide parking for the new development at 17-23 Beckwood Street North. Application B 2203 illustrates the conceptual development envelope, and it is not proposal, it is more justifying the reason why 7 William Street can be severed. The approved site plan for 17-23 Beckwood has a driveway alongside of 7 William Street East, but due to the application B 2205, it's going to be replaced. It's going to be removed to allow for a larger building envelope, which is 7 William Street East. Next slide, please. For the site plan agreement, 17-23 Beckwood also has an additional landscaping security in the amount of 10,000, which will be used if the lot at 7 William Street East is not developed within a year. So there is a year that they have to develop 7 William Street East. The proposed lot also contains an infiltration area identified in the stormwater management plan that is associated with the site plan agreement. Next slide, please. So here we have the site visits, and maybe easier for me to describe what you're looking at. So the first picture is the 5 William Street East that houses houses Hunt Dobson and Interact, the 2 buildings. And the next slide beside it shows you the vacant gravel area that was initially Abbas Electrical, but now is a vacant lot at 7 William Street East. Now beside it, there is a paved path, and that is part of the easement that's been created. So there's going to be 2 easements created. The first easement is going to be ending where the block car is, and then the second easement will be right behind it. Next slide, please. So here is like back view of the lot. You can see the vacant lot on the right side, and you can see the commercial building for Hunt and Dobson on the other side. And the next picture shows you just more of an interior look at Hunt and Dobson. Next slide, please. The purpose of public meetings is to involve the committee in considering a change to the configuration of properties. Next slide, please. Public and agency feedback. Consultation is an integral part of the planning process. Next slide, please. So we had consulted the Department of Public Works on what would happen if the site at 7 William were to be developed, and they suggested that if the site were to be developed, that it be subject to a site grading and drainage plan, a serviceability report, and a stormwater management report once permit application had been processed. In speaking with the Economic Development Department in terms of what the potential could be for the development envelope, they were advising that a mixed-use development would be realistic in that position, where you would have commercial uses on the bottom and residential uses on top. Also, the applicants who would be purchasing the lot at 7 William could benefit from a CIP improvement program. Alternatively, if the development does not proceed, the area could be converted into parking, which would provide additional parking for residents and patrons for the commercial building at 17-23 Beckwood North. Next slide, please. Also, in speaking with the DBA, you're also saying that because of the constrained size of the development envelope, that this space could be used for a take-up restaurant or food stand or coffee shop, something that could be small enough, but also commercially viable. They also identified it could be an outdoor dining area as well, or maybe even an independent massage therapist location. There's no public feedback given at this time. Next slide, please. Now, in reviewing the planning rationale, we had looked at the targeted growth area policies because the location of the 7 William Street was within the growth area. And the policies were recommending the highest and best use of the area, which could possibly be a mixed use approach. And they're also suggesting intensification of the area and parts of consolidation as well. Next slide, please. Application B2203, which was the conceptual development envelope, has 2 parking stalls, which is within the downtown core, and that could entirely accommodate a commercial space or a mixed-use approach, which uses commercial uses on the first floor and residential uses on the second floor. And the easement that would be conveyed be running to the back of the lot, which would provide parking for the retained lands at 17-23 Beckwith, which would be 3 additional parking stalls. Now, the parking requirement suggested here is only used for reference. This is not necessarily this is not a proposal. So these are only used as reference as opposed to what would actually be required if it's being developed. Also, we should take into account that the new minimum height requirements in the downtown core is 11 meters. So that would have to be considered if we're attempting to develop the development and if we continue to develop the development envelope. So the new building there would have to be at least 3 stories. Next slide, please. Application B2204 proposes an easement behind 17-23 Beckwith that would favor the lot of 7 William Street East. The creation of the easement would provide pedestrian and vehicular access and satisfies any access requirements posed by the development of the commercial building. Because the commercial building would need a minimum at least 6 parking spaces. And I believe from my memory that the applicant had applied for a cash in lieu because he initially did not have enough parking. Now, application 2205 also creates permanent access to the rear of the building for 17-23 with the creation of an easement that is 52 meters long. By removing the existing driveway and essentially creating with an easement permanent access for 5 William Street East. Next slide, please. The Planning Advisory Committee is tasked with deciding on these applications presented. They should be made aware that they would be approving or not approving all these applications together since they're all dependent on each other, if they believe that the application is either viable or not. Based on the review of the applicable governing policies and consideration of the intricacies of the subject property, planning staff are of the view that a severance to create infill development on William Street East, as well as 2 easements, is supported on policy and can be given favorable consideration by the committee. Next slide, please. Staff recommend that the committee approve the consent application B2203. And one thing that should be noted that the owner shall demonstrate to the satisfaction that the site plan control agreement between the town and Mike Tabaja will remain in effect with the severance of lot 7 William Street East. The next slide, please. Staff recommend that the committee approves the consent application B2204, subject to following conditions. Next slide, please. And the similar conditions apply for applications 2205. Thank you. I know that was a lot to go through, so if you have any questions, please ask.
Thanks, Carl. We have no public participation here, so I'll move right to Tracy, do you want to speak to this, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Richard, you did a great job. I felt bad because I'm pretty sure it was one of your first files and it's a messy one. So great job. I'll just provide a couple high-level comments because there was a lot of details there. So I helped Mr. Tabaja with the site plan for the property at 23 Beckwith. And as we were working through that, he bought the property at 7 William Street. And inadvertently, those properties landed in the same name and they merged together. That was never his intent, but that's how the Planning Act works. So when we started to figure out how we could undo that inadvertent merger, we discovered a few things. One was that 7 William Street completely stands alone. It did not, although there is an easement, which you saw in the photos and you can see on my sketches, there is an easement that crosses 5 William Street and crosses 23 Beckwith, and a number of properties benefit from that. 7 William Untitled does not have any benefit to use that easement. And it's a very small lot, as you saw in the photos and you can see on our figures. It did previously have a small building on it, which, as you saw, has been removed, as you know. And so when we started looking at, like, how do we demonstrate that 7 William Street is going to be a viable building lot, we decided to approach Hunt and Dobson to see if they would allow the property at 7 William Street to use the same easement that a number of other properties already use. And Hunt and Dobson was agreeable to that. So that's why one of the third application is to grant an easement over the Hunt and Dobson property to benefit 7 William. It allows more room for a building on 7 William Street, and I think in my mind gives it greater potential for a small building, but for future development. So that's the reason for that easement over Hunt and Dobson. Just it did, 7 William did not enjoy easement over that, even though I think most of the property owners thought it did. The first big application is literally just to separate 23 Beckwith from 7 William. They merged inadvertently. And the reason there's an easement there is, as Richard described in the site plan process, there was some parking and some snow storage granted on top of 7 William Street. And so we needed to respect that. So 23 Beckwith gets to keep that. And so we presented that as an easement. And then again, we want to ensure 7 William Street has as much access as possible. So we wanted to extend the easement access, which will go over 5 William Street, over 23 Beckwith, so that we're trying to make 7 William Street as viable a building lot as we can. And the sketch my office prepared shows a small building envelope, but it does meet your zoning setbacks. There's room for a few parking spaces in behind it. And with the acceptance of the easement applications, it would have access to the back of the building for future development. So as you heard in Richard's presentation, there's a few things that could happen on that property, but we wanted to be able to show that a building with a bit of parking could actually be accommodated there. So I'm happy to re-explain any of the consent applications, but that's kind of the reason why you have these 3 applications before you this evening, is to separate the 2 lots that merged inadvertently and make 7 William Street as viable a building lot as we could. I'll leave it at that, but happy to answer questions if you're lost in the details there.
Thanks, Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions, committee? Jay?
No, no questions. And we're all quite familiar with this site, and you're right, it's sort of tight and messy and all the rest of it. The good news is we're going to get 6 downtown residential units off Beckwith Street, and possibly another commercial property on 7 William Street. The Hunt and Dobson property, my understanding is for sale, but is there still parking back there that would be attached to that property? I guess my question is.
Tracy?
So yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I admit I'm not exactly sure the parking arrangement on the Hunt and Dobson property. The parking that we show on our plan for the 2 properties that are Mr. Tabaja's, all of the parking, it's my understanding on those 2 lots is allocated. I'm not aware of the parking arrangement on the Hunt and Dobson property, but the easement that we're proposing to grant, if you will, it already exists. So we're not interfering with any existing parking situation.
Yeah, so it would be status quo.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's all good, and I support staff's recommendation.
Thanks, Jay. Anyone else? Okay, if there's no questions, thanks, Tracy.
You're welcome.
The committee will now move to making a decision for the consent applications for, I will entertain a motion for the applications. Each individual, we need a motion for each application. So, can I have a motion then for B 22-03? Moved by Jay. Seconded by Jacqueline. All in favor? Carried. I'll need a motion now for B 22-04.
So moved.
Moved by Bill. Seconded by Stephen. All in favor? Carried. Motion for B 22-05. Moved by Jay, seconded by Stephen. All in favor? Carried. Thanks for participating in the planning process of applications B 22-03, B 22-04, and B 22-05. Any participants that have not signed in or required any further notice regarding the applications are asked to please reach out to the planning clerk, Mary Remig, by phone at the town hall. Appeal rights are prescribed by the Planning Act and will be outlined in the notice of decision. If you have any questions on this application or the process, I invite you to get in touch with our planning staff. This concludes the public meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. We will now move to the next item on our agenda.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Night.
Good night.
I believe it's time for an update. Is that what's happening next?
The next item on our agenda is the priority issues, which we have none. And then item number 7, project update. Richard?
Okay, so there are 2 project updates. For site plan 22-17, that refers to blocks 27 and 28. They have been signed and registered the title, so that has been done. And within each block, there's approximately, I think, 4 units. And for site plan 22-18, that's relating to blocks 32 to 34. And those have also been registered to title. So that would be amounting to 5 blocks, all registered to title since the last month.
Any questions? Carl?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'll await any questions. I just have a follow-up update to Richard's point.
I'm done.
Okay, Carl.
Sorry, so as committee knows, Bill 23 has now received royal assent. It came through fairly quickly, and it changes a number of the planning operations, as well as alters certain financial tools and other tools through the broader development approval process in the province. And one of those is through site plan controls. So moving forward, residential developments with less than 10 units are not subject to site plan approval. Planning staff have reached out to legal for confirmation on whether existing applications, so a site plan application that was initiated before royal assent to Bill 23 on November 28th, whether those are still whether we still proceed with those site plan applications or abandon them. So just we've also reached out to the to legal for a few other directions on implementation pieces, particularly as it relates to site plan approval, and the advice we receive on that will inform our next steps on operational items. It's never a dull moment in the policy world.
Jacqueline?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, Carl, can you clarify? Can you just say that one more time? Less than 10 units?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. The Planning Act's definition of development has changed. So as of a couple of weeks ago, residential units or residential developments featuring less than 10 residential units are no longer subject to site plan control. Municipalities can no longer require site plan approval or require a site plan approval process for those.
Jay?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. I mean, we're familiar with the site plan approval process, and this committee in the past has weighed in on that item many times, and it's often aesthetics and foliage and color of finish and that sort of thing. But in my experience, I think my committee colleagues would agree, each and every time almost whoever the developer is more than amenable to work with the town on that type of thing. So I'm not sure that we have ever delayed anything at that point. And I don't know how that really affects getting houses built faster. So that's my 2 cents. And I mean, oftentimes when we're talking about, we're talking about these blocks on Staples Boulevard. Well, we've applied, we've approved site plan approval on many blocks in that area. And so I have no problem with staff going ahead and approving and because it's sort of a waste of time for us. But that's my opinion on that. I don't think that our site plan approval activities have delayed anything here. And I did have a question for Richard on the Staples stuff, which is, are there street signs on Staples Boulevard? I apologize, I haven't driven over there recently.
I have not myself, so I can't tell you if there are street signs right now. Why are you asking about street signs? Just curious.
Well, I just wondered if there's actually a sign that says Staples Boulevard
Oh,
over there.
I
The
do
actual-
not know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Brennan, I can actually answer that. So we did have somebody submit a request because there was one supposed to be installed as part of phase 1 Bellamy Farms in accordance with the subdivision agreement. I did follow up with the developer of that subdivision to see whether or not one had been installed. I was of the understanding that one would be installed quite some time ago. I'm going to follow up though and confirm whether or not it was.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Any other comments, Carl?
No, I was just a little update on Bill 23, and depending on some of the advice we receive, that will certainly guide the orientation for the next committee and how we look at those. But certainly to echo Councillor Brennan's comments, I think we're fortunate with the development community we have in town. They've been, as he'd indicated, it's been typically certainly the things that the committee looks for in terms of design and the landscaping. Those have been collaborative processes, and we have good developers who are eager to sort of go above and beyond the bare minimum on that, and see how that goes from the regulatory end moving forward. But certainly some of the I guess the issues that we're attempting to solve through Bill 23 may not be issues that have bogged down Smith Falls so far anyway. So
Thanks, Carl. Well, before I ask for a motion for adjournment, I'd like to wish everyone a merry, joyous Christmas and all the best in 2023.
John, I just echo that and say we have a turnover of committee now, and I want to thank my colleagues on the committee for a great 4 years, and I've never seen it so busy, and it's been fun working with you, and I look forward to the next 4 years.
Thanks, Jay.
As staff resource, I'd like to echo that as well. We've given you a lot of work. We've held you on a lot of evenings over the last 4 years. It's been a pleasure working with all of you. You've provided a lot of excellent feedback. You've fulfilled your terms of reference really, really well. And I think through the work that you've done, we're a better town for it, and it's provided and it's enhanced the quality of the development that we've been bringing forward to council. So once again, for everyone, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we look forward to where our paths cross next.
Thanks, Carl. Can I have a motion for adjournment? Moved by Jay. Thanks, guys.
Good
Merry
night. Good
Christmas.
night.
Merry Christmas, guys.
See you later.
Night.